Hi and welcome to another endgame video. In this video I'm gonna show you an important defensive technique in the opposite colored bishop ending, and after this you will be able to save this endgame even though you're 2 pawns down. So if you want to challenge yourself again, try to think about the position and make a decision if you would defend this ending with bishop to b3 or with bishop to d7. Both moves are intending to prevent white from playing e6, which is his only way to progress with the pawns, because if f6, then we easily set up a blockade on the light squares where he cannot fight for with his dark square bishops. So make a choice, bishop b3 or bishop d7. How do we prevent this move here more successfully? And we will now discuss the solution. We will first have a look at the wrong move, which is bishop b3. And the problem with this move, and this is quite a common pattern in opposite color bishop endings, is this bishop is not keeping an eye on this f5 pawn, which it would from d7. So in this situation the white king will be able to move around and to support the pawns more easily because it's not tied to this pawn. And white doesn't need to be in a hurry here. He can improve the bishop first and then try to bring the king around, because black will not be in time to reroute the bishop to the correct square, because once the bishop goes back to a4 there will be e6 and the bishop is not in time to sacrifice itself on e6, gaining the 2 pawns. So white could, for example, start with bishop to e1. Black can basically just wait because he cannot bring the bishop back again. Note that here it's quite important that after e6 white is in time to play king to e5 in case black attacks the pawn, because otherwise black would again be able to sacrifice here, but here it's not the case. The pawns progress to the 6th rank and then it's just a loss. So black always needs to watch out for this e6 push, and therefore he should not move the bishop away, but white will improve the bishop. Now the king needs to make a decision which side to go to. Let's have a look at king to f7 first. Now white needs to improve the king. In general, the king needs to go all the way to d6 to support the e6 push. Let's start with this one. Now it's very important to understand why this bishop needs to be on h4 for this plan, and the reason for this is quite simple, because we need to answer bishop b1 with e6, and a black king should not be able to counter attack this f5 pawn, and we want to be able to push this pawn even further. And if he would have king f6 here, we could probably not progress, but here the king needs to go back. We can push the pawn and we will be able to protect the pawn on e6 again, and then do the same again, push the pawns on the light squares. So that's the reason black cannot really play bishop to b1, but if he waits we will progress, and again he cannot play bishop c2 because of e6, and no matter where the king goes, f6 will come and we will be able to defend the pawn and then again improve the bishop and go further on the light squares finally. So black can basically wait again, but we continue, and now e6 will be coming. Black can wait again, but here e6 and f6 are on the board, and finally we will win the game. For example, the easiest here is just to play f7, threatening bishop e7 and f8 queen, and also note that this is not a stalemate here, which is also sometimes a defensive idea, but here black just loses. Let's have a look at black's other try, going with the king to d7, but in this case white will have the plan to move the king around to f6 and then push e6, which is basically very similar, and black cannot really do a lot against it, because here, for example, waiting with bishop to f7, king g5, he cannot really prevent us from coming further. Maybe king e7 is a try, but white can come forward here with king to h6. Black king is going somewhere. Probably d7 is the only move, because otherwise e6 would come. And here the king will finally come to f6, and then e6 will be pushed, king to e5 and pawn to f6. And once the pawns have reached the 6th rank, there is just too little space for the bishop to defend. Let me maybe show you this one time. Here, if black is waiting, white will push, white will go here, black can wait. But in this situation, black will be in Zugzwang, and the bishop cannot wait here forever, because this diagonal is just too short. There is no h9 square, and yeah, that's why he will need to move the bishop away once the king has no moves left. So white could proceed with king to d6. King d8 is now not possible because of f7 check, and moving the bishop is also not possible because of f7 check. So king to f8 is the only move, but already here after king d7, black is in Zugzwang, and he cannot sacrifice for stalemate, because yeah, it's not a stalemate, and here white wins in many ways, easiest being even push the e-pawn. So here what you need to remember is there is not enough space for the bishop, and it will be Zugzwang. So let's have a look at the correct defense now, which is going with the bishop to d7. And once you understood this setup, it is very easy to hold the position, because white can now not progress his king, because the king is kind of stuck to the f5 pawn. What can white try? White could try f6, but this is quite a bad try, because he cannot break the blockade on the light squares again. I will just move my bishop back and forth on this diagonal, and the king will stay on f7, and there is just no way to proceed. What else could white try? White could again try to come around with the king, but I will just put my king to f7, so his king won't go to g6, and then I will just wait with my bishop. He will never be able to push e6, because I will take and trade his last pawn. Also, e6 is of course not possible because I take. So what's actually the best try for white here? What I would try is to give a check and force the black king to one direction, and then maybe try to organize some Zugzwang position. For example, I could try to come around with the king, but basically I think there is not a lot white can try from here, because it's just not possible to leave this area with the king, because the f5 pawn would drop, and once you cannot bring the king any closer, you won't make progress with this e6 push. And also waiting, it doesn't help, because this bishop has 2 squares available. That's why it's so important that we stop the pawns now, because we have enough space with the bishop not to get in Zugzwang. If we couldn't play bishop c8, we would just be lost, because e6 would come. But in this situation, we have bishop c8, and white can just not do anything. So I hope this was instructive for you. Remember the defensive technique. The bishop should always keep an eye on the pawn while protecting against the pawn push as well. So bishop d7 is the way to go. We do 2 things at the same time, and that's the way to save the game. It works against 2 connected passed pawns in the opposite color bishop ending, and the exception is once they are advanced to the 6th rank, because our bishop is running out of space and we will be in Zugzwang. So thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.